in some cases a bit more perspiration than what the norm was. But I think at the end of the day, if you get stuck on something, and I guess in a certain degree, one evening we were having the dialogue, and I guess that's where we as people quite often miss it. The dialogue is, I think, what life was many moons ago, when all over the world people were sitting around a fire at night. People would talk into the fire, because that was what you could see, the light. And when politicians say, or when some fellow in government says, we need to debate, then he's already made up his mind, and there's nothing to talk about, because whatever you say is a waste of breath, because it's ping pong, it's a duel, it's a fight. I have to out-argue you. Then there's another thing that is, I mentioned the reality of organized labor in this country. Another thing they teach the shop stewards specifically is never call the vote before you counted the win. So you keep on arguing until you realize there's enough nods, and then you call the vote. Otherwise you'll never get somewhere. And that had been what life had become in the Western world and everywhere else. Companies, everybody. But what we were talking about, the education system, is not my opinion versus yours. We were talking into the fire. And that was, I guess, good, because it's just my perspective and it's your perspective. And I'm not trying to convince you of anything, you're not trying to convince me of anything, we just talk into the fire. And if I can't see what you see, I might move closer to you and I look at the fire from the same angle and we see the same thing maybe. It still doesn't mean that I can't move back to my space and see it from my perspective, but then I'd also seen your perspective. And one of the big flaws that I experienced in education, and I'm not saying education had failed me, because then I'm looking for an excuse, but just the way the process worked made me fear every exam. And they were always out there to get me, in some cases literally. And I guess that's why a lot of people just give up on the process. For me, it was the first evaluation, Cybertracker evaluation I went through, was a 1 week long event. From first light till last light we got grilled. And I was just finished by the end. And I realized for the first time in my life I'd actually concentrated for an entire week, every single minute of the daylight. And I couldn't wait to get back to the next one. In other words, for me, that was the biggest thing to break through, was the fear of being examined. And most of us, somewhere along the line, have had a bad experience in terms of being examined. And that's not what this is about. And I guess that's what you said yesterday when we came back from the trail, is you'd forgotten that you were in the evaluation process. that you were being evaluated at one stage. And that's where you can go because of the process. It's not you this or you that. It's simply a mirror to look into, to see where you are at this point in time against something. And I want you to each go into that mode, go into that space. It's a mirror. I guess for all of us, most of us, when you're in a totally strange environment and you work with animals that are very different than what you're used to, they leave sign that you're totally unfamiliar with. I mean, we've gone through a couple of days of something, but the reality is there is still a lot to learn. But remember what I said, when you go back home, you'll see how much easier it is when you get there. Kirsty had been through that mode a couple of times where she works in an area which is foreign to her, and then boom, when she's back home it works again. Remember the California New England evaluation. So that, I guess, is probably the first lesson to learn, or the biggest lesson to learn out of the process itself. Is it's not a stick to eat with. It's something to just take stock, and which gaps can you still fill in or work on. Now, there might be, go away. Then in terms of the process, as I said right at the beginning, it is to a certain degree subjective, because it's my perception of the trail itself, which I also have to measure and gauge. And then I also have to measure or constantly remind myself of what the definition would be of somebody with a level 1 or level 2 or level 3. Where did I slot in when I was there? Because I'd been there. One of the dilemmas with some of the evaluators is they were never level 1. They got to level 3 right from the start. I wasn't that good. So that in itself is a process, right? Chris, you mentioned that on the first trail that you had, you battled to see things, and you know you should have seen them, and you didn't see them, and they just didn't work for you. And then you said specifically that it was probably a case of just the pressure of the evaluation on you. And that's the reality. So I guess that's the one thing that you can take home from this, is to just learn to deal with it. Ignore the process, ignore the evaluate. Just do what you do. And remember what I said. If we're not sure what you're doing, we'll ask. And it's not to be funny or strange. It's just because we want to know what you're doing. And that's fine. I'm going to work a little bit backwards in terms of the process. On stealth, you did quite well. I guess on noise levels you could still work a little bit, for the simple reason that, and when I say noise levels, there's other noise than just sound. Noise is also things like this. If you think of what attracts attention in the bush, It's not the kudu standing still or slowly feeding. It's when the tail does this. Or the duiker, you often won't see a duiker, but then you see a white flash, and it's a tail that moved.